Hey guys, tonight we're starting with a story. Samuel used memory tailoring to erase the Fawcett family's ancestral portraits, eliminate his rivals, and finally won the inheritance before leaving the relevant society. So before you get comfortable, take a second to like this video and subscribe, but only if you truly enjoy what I'm doing here. And let me know in the comments where you're tuning in from and what time it is for you right now. It's always fascinating to see people joining us from all around the world. In the autumn of 1887, London's fog hung like ink-soaked cotton wool, pressing heavily on the lead-gray roofs of Fawcett Manor. At 5 in the morning, the sound of old butler Hugh's leather boots on the polished oak floor of the gallery was swallowed by the thick mist, leaving only a faint echo. As he had done every day for 30 years, he carried a brass candlestick to check, for the gallery was the sole sanctuary of the Fawcett family, where ancestors in gilded frames looked down with frozen gazes on the 7-generation lineage. The candlelight flickered across the frames, first brushing the imposing face of Thomas Fawcett, the second lord of the manor. His goatee was sharp and distinct, a proud symbol of London's business elite in the late 18th century. Hughes nodded in satisfaction, then turned toward the 3 portraits at the end of the corridor, key figures of the family's past century, and the ones he meticulously polished each day. But when the candlelight danced over the first portrait, Hugh's breath caught in his throat. The candlestick slipped from his trembling hand, clanging against the floor as sparks flared and died instantly. The gallery was plunged into brief darkness, with only the pale fog outside outlining the frames. He fumbled to retrieve the candlestick, relit it, and his hands continued to shake uncontrollably. The portrait depicted great-uncle Alfred Fawcett, the gentleman said to have won glory in the colonies. Yet now, his face resembled a watercolor washed away by rain. Once sharp eyebrows and eyes blurred into a murky ochre stain. His prominent nose dissolved into the canvas's cream background, leaving only the dark brown outline of his hair barely distinguishable. Hughes leaned closer. The canvas surface was smooth as new, without a trace of water damage or scratches. The paint hadn't physically peeled off. It had seemingly evaporated into thin air. He stumbled to the next portrait, his gambler aunt, Isabella. The scene was even more bizarre. Her sapphire silk gown retained its luster, and the pearl bracelet she twirled between her fingers showed clear grain. But her face, once delicate yet haggard from years of indulgence at the card table, was a blank void, as if never touched by a brush. Most chilling of all was the gilded nameplate below the frame. Once engraved with Isabella Fawcett 1821 to 1867, it now lay smooth and bare, not a single scratch remaining. The third portrait suffered the same fate. It was Samuel's father, Edmund, rarely spoken of due to his early death. His face was equally blurred, with only the black of his cravat still distinct, like a stain floating on the canvas. Hughes ran his rough fingertips over the fabric. It felt dry and delicate, identical to a normal portrait. This was no human vandalism. It was like some supernatural force had precisely erased the most core identifiers of identity from the paintings. My God! Hugh's voice was hoarse as a cracked bell. He scrambled out of the gallery, crashing through the manor's carved wooden front door. The morning mist poured into his collar, chilling him to the bone, but his fear was far colder than the late autumn air. News spread like wildfire across the estate. When the first ray of sunlight struggled through the fog to illuminate the breakfast room, the family was already in chaos. Matthew Fawcett, Samuel's cousin and the current lord of the manor, slammed his fist on the table, sending silver cutlery trembling. Hughes, have you lost your mind? The canvases are intact. How could the faces disappear? This is absurd. It's true, sir. I swear on my honor. Hughes stood pale-faced in the corner, his apron clenched tightly in his hands. Just go see for yourself. Mr. Alfred's face, Lady Isabella's face. They're gone. Matthew's wife, Elena, let out a sharp scream. She clutched her chest, her delicate lace gloves whitening with tension. "It's a curse. The scandals we buried are coming back to haunt us. Alfred killing that MP in a duel. Isabella losing the family gold mines. I knew these dirty secrets would bite us sooner or later." Silence fell over the table. Alfred's duel scandal had occurred in 1840. To avoid dragging the family into political turmoil, the then-lord had announced he voluntarily traveled to India to manage plantations, a thinly veiled exile. Isabella, meanwhile, had become addicted to gambling in 1860, pawning family assets to cover massive debts. It was only through funds raised by her uncles that the creditors were paid off, with the official story claiming she retired due to illness. These were secrets known only to core family members, never leaked to the outside world. "Be quiet, Elena," Matthew snapped, unable to hide the tremor in his voice. "It's just a problem with the paintings. Maybe the paint deteriorated or dampness caused this. We'll hire the best restorer money can buy." "Stop spreading rumors." "A restorer?" A soft voice came from the doorway. Samuel Fawcett stood there, dressed in a charcoal gray woolen dressing gown, his eyes behind gold-rimmed glasses calm as still water. He held an open ancient book in his hand, with ink stains on his fingertips, clearly having just come from the study. "I went to the gallery earlier. Paint deterioration wouldn't be this precise, targeting only faces and nameplates while leaving clothing and backgrounds intact. This feels more like a deliberate erasure." Matthew frowned, clearly impatient with his unconventional cousin. "Samuel, this isn't your ancient book research. Don't add to the chaos with your superstitious nonsense. Family matters are none of your business." Samuel did not argue. He simply closed the book gently, his gaze sweeping over the varied expressions around the table. Matthew's agitation, Elena's fear, Cousin Richard's schadenfreude, Cousin Emily's confusion. He nodded slightly and turned to leave. "Perhaps you're right. I only think it best not to touch the portraits until the restorer arrives." His figure disappeared down the corridor. No one noticed the corner of a handkerchief peeking out of his dressing gown pocket, embroidered with a strange vine pattern, stained with a faint, barely perceptible green mark like grass juice. In the gallery, the blurred portraits hung silently, like soulless husks, exuding an unsettling aura as the daylight gradually brightened. That afternoon, Mr. Arnold, London's most renowned art restorer, was summoned to the manor. He studied the portraits for 3 hours straight, wearing a magnifying glass, sometimes lifting paint flakes with tweezers, sometimes conducting chemical tests. His final conclusion left everyone speechless. The canvases are high-quality linen from the mid-19th century, perfectly preserved with no signs of dampness or insect damage. The paint is also top-grade mineral pigment from that era, extremely stable, impossible to fade like this naturally. Mr. Arnold removed his magnifying glass, his expression grave. "Even more strange, I detected a faint residue of plant sap on the surface, but its composition is unknown. This sap didn't corrode the canvas. Instead, it seems to have dissolved the identity information in the paint. In 30 years of practice, I've never seen anything like it." "Identity information?" Matthew frowned. "What does that mean?" "I'm not sure, just a feeling." Mr. Arnold shook his head. "These portraits have lost their directionality. They're no longer portraits of specific people, just blurry paintings. Barring a miracle, those faces will never be restored." The restorer's words shattered all hope of a simple explanation. Rumors of hauntings spread like wildfire among the servants. Some claimed to hear the sound of brushes on canvas in the gallery at night. Others swore they saw white figures drifting before the portraits. Elena even invited a parish priest to perform an exorcism in the gallery, but to no avail. The blurred portraits hung like an inescapable nightmare over everyone's hearts. Samuel, however, remained calm. He went to the study as usual each day, immersed in ancient books, occasionally visiting the gallery to stand before the damaged works as if admiring incomplete art. No one knew that when night fell, the manor's true secrets would unfold in his hands. The study of Fawcett Manor was Samuel's sanctuary and his battlefield. Located on the west side of the main house, it featured large arched windows overlooking a neatly trimmed rose garden, now obscured by fog. The room was lined with tall bookshelves reaching the vaulted ceiling, filled with medieval manuscripts, Renaissance art albums, and rare volumes on the occult, treasures accumulated by generations of the family, yet dismissed as worthless papers by Matthew and his ilk. Samuel sat at a large mahogany desk, his fingertips brushing a 17th-century parchment manuscript. The cover bore no text, only an embossed symbol, a fountain pen wrapped in vines, the mark of the Memory Weavers' Society. He wore white silk gloves, his movements gentle as if caressing a fragile treasure. There was a soft knock at the door, and Hugh's voice came from outside. "Mr. Samuel, your afternoon tea is ready. Leave it at the door, Hughes. I'm busy right now." Samuel's voice was gentle, just as it had been in the breakfast room that morning. As the footsteps faded, Samuel removed his gloves and took a small red sandalwood box from a hidden compartment in the desk. Opening it, he found black velvet lining holding a silver badge, engraved with the same vine and pen symbol, and several letters sealed with wax. He picked up one letter. The wax seal matched the badge perfectly. The letter was from the Society's contact, its message concise. "Leafy grass has been delivered. Complete the ritual before the next full moon. Remember, the Fawcett family's memory anchors are far stronger than you imagine." Samuel's gaze darkened. He had joined the Memory Weavers 5 years earlier. Back then, he was a student at Cambridge, specializing in medieval literature, when he stumbled upon a hidden manuscript in the family library. A diary left by his great-grandfather, detailing the secrets of memory tailoring and the existence of the Memory Weavers. From that moment, he knew his seemingly peaceful life as a scholar was merely the calm before the storm. The battle for the Fawcett inheritance had long been brewing beneath the surface. The old patriarch, Samuel's grandfather, had passed away the previous winter, leaving a peculiar will. All family assets, including the factories in London, the Yorkshire estate, and overseas plantations, shall be inherited by a descendant of pure blood, unblemished reputation, and who has gained the approval of the ancestors. While the will appeared fair, it effectively excluded Samuel from the core competition. Cousins like Matthew and Richard had direct ancestors who were shining figures in family history. Matthew's grandfather had been a privy councillor to Queen Victoria, and Richard's great-grandmother was a renowned philanthropist. Their portraits occupied the most prominent positions in the gallery, their deeds celebrated repeatedly as capital for Matthew and Richard's inheritance claims. Samuel's father, Edmund, had been marginalized by the family from an early age due to poor health, passing away at 30. His only portrait hung in a corner of the gallery. More importantly, Edmund's mother, Samuel's grandmother, had been rumored to have gypsy ancestry. In a family that valued pure blood above all, this was a hidden stain. Though Matthew and his allies never said it outright, they spread whispers suggesting Samuel was of impure blood and unfit to inherit. Unblemished reputation, pure blood. These 8 words were a shackle binding Samuel tightly. He knew that to break free, his gentle scholar's persona would not be enough. He had to rewrite history, not by altering books, but by altering the family's collective memory. And the anchors of that collective memory were the portraits in the gallery. Samuel set down the letter and walked to the bookshelf, gently pushing aside a row of heavy Latin tomes. The shelf slid open, revealing a hidden niche containing a black clay jar carved with intricate patterns, sealed with a cork and wax. He picked up the jar and shook it slightly, hearing the slosh of liquid inside, the sap of the leafy grass, the core medium of memory tailoring. Leafy grass was a rare plant that grew only in the peat bogs of the Scottish Highlands. said to have been used by druids in ritual ceremonies during the Middle Ages. Its sap possessed an uncanny property. It could dissolve the memory energy attached to physical objects. The Memory Weavers were one of the few organizations that held the secrets to cultivating and harvesting this plant. Samuel's choice to target Alfred and Isabella first was no accident. Alfred was Matthew's direct great-grandfather, while Richard's grandmother was Isabella's younger sister. By erasing the vessels of these ancestor scandals, the foundations of Matthew and Richard's unblemished reputations would crack. More importantly, these ancestor scandals had already been deliberately covered up by the family, making their memory anchors relatively weak and easier to tailor. Knock, knock, knock. Another knock came, more urgent than before. "Samuel, are you in there?" It was Cousin Emily's voice, laced with panic. "Richard just fainted in the gallery. He said he saw Aunt Isabella's portrait moving." A faint, imperceptible smile crossed Samuel's face. He quickly returned the clay jar to the niche, slid the bookshelf back into place, straightened his collar, and opened the door. What happened? Richard has always been healthy. How could he suddenly faint? Emily's face was pale. She grabbed Samuel's arm, her nails digging into his flesh. "I don't know. We went to the gallery together." Richard was standing in front of Aunt Isabella's portrait when he suddenly shouted, "She's looking at me," and collapsed. "The doctor's here. He says it's just shock, nothing serious." But when he woke up, he said he doesn't remember who Aunt Isabella is at all. Samuel's heart quickened. The memory alteration was taking effect faster than he'd anticipated. "Doesn't remember her?" He feigned surprise. "That's impossible. We all heard stories about Aunt Isabella from our elders when we were children." "I know." Emily's voice trembled with tears. "Matthew says it's proof of haunting. He wants to burn all the blurred portraits." "Samuel, you've read so many books. What do you think is happening?" Samuel patted Emily's hand gently, his tone reassuring. "Don't panic. Let's go check on Richard first. As for the portraits, burning them might not be wise. They're part of family history. Even if something's wrong, we should find out why first." He followed Emily to the guest room, passing servants who whispered nervously to one another. Matthew stood in the corridor, shouting angrily at the doctor, clearly dissatisfied with the shock diagnosis. Samuel's gaze swept over the crowd, finally settling on the guest room doorknob. He knew this was only the beginning. Richard's memory loss would be a new catalyst for family panic, and he needed only to play the role of the calm scholar while waiting for his next opportunity. At 11 o'clock that night, the manor fell completely silent. Samuel changed into a black night suit, hiding a specially crafted brush and a small porcelain vial of leafy grass sap at his waist before quietly opening his bedroom window. His room was on the second floor of the main house, overlooking a dense thicket. He landed almost silently. The gallery was located on the east side of the main house, a short distance from his bedroom. He hurried along the wall, avoiding patrolling servants. He knew the estate's guard routes like the back of his hand, having deliberately memorized them during his walks over the years. The gallery window was unlocked, just as he'd arranged that morning, under the pretense of studying portrait details. He'd asked a servant to break the latch, saying it would be repaired when the restorer arrived. Pushing the window open gently, Samuel slipped into the gallery. Moonlight streamed through the tall mullioned windows, casting an eerie silver glow over the hanging portraits. He walked to Edmund's portrait, his father's. At that moment, his father's face was already mostly blurred, with only a faint curve of his lips still visible. "Father," Samuel whispered, "soon they will pay for their past contempt. The glory of the Fawcett family should not be inherited by hypocrites." He took the small porcelain vial and brush from his waist, dipping the brush in the pale green leafy grass sap. His target this time was Matthew's grandfather, the glorious ancestor who had served as Queen Victoria's privy councillor. He knew this ancestor's memory anchor was extremely strong. Erasing his face completely would require precise technique and more time. Just as his brush was about to touch the portrait, a faint sound of footsteps came from the gallery door. Samuel's heart tightened. He quickly hid the brush and vial behind his back, stepping behind a large landscape painting. In the moonlight, a hunched figure entered. It was old butler Hughes. Hughes held an oil lamp, looking around nervously, muttering to himself. "God protect me from unholy things. Mr. Matthew sent me to check if the portraits have changed again. This old body can't stand any more scares." Samuel held his breath, watching as Hughes moved among the portraits. He knew Hughes was a long-serving family servant, privy to many of the family's secrets, and fiercely loyal to Matthew's father, the previous lord. If he was discovered, the consequences would be disastrous. As Hughes approached Matthew's grandfather's portrait, preparing to hold up the lamp for a closer look, Samuel suddenly recalled the whispering curse taught to him by the society. He placed his finger to his lips and whispered the incantation, a fragment of ancient Celtic that could induce auditory hallucinations, making people hear non-existent sounds. The moment the incantation ended, Hughes froze, his face contorted with fear. He pricked up his ears, his voice trembling. "Who's there? Who's speaking?" The gallery was empty, save for the faint whispers triggered by Samuel's incantation, like sighs drifting from the depths of the portraits. Hugh's hands began to shake, and the lamp's glow wavered. "Is that you, Lady Isabella? I didn't mean to disturb you. I'll leave right away." He scrambled out of the gallery, dropping the lamp in his haste. Samuel emerged from behind the painting, picked up the lamp, and blew out the flame. He knew this unexpected interruption had only made the haunting rumors more credible, and Hughes, a potential threat, had been temporarily scared away. He picked up the brush again, dipped it full of leafy grass sap, and gently applied it to Matthew's grandfather's portrait. In the moonlight, the once imposing face slowly blurred, like a melting wax figure. Samuel's movements were steady and precise, each stroke rewriting family memory, each application paving his path to the inheritance. As the first light of dawn appeared in the east, Samuel completed his work. Matthew's grandfather's portrait was now completely unrecognizable, the inscriptions on the nameplate erased without a trace. He packed up his tools, climbed out the window, and returned to his bedroom. Changing out of the night suit and into a neat dressing gown, he transformed back into the gentle scholar. At breakfast, Matthew burst into the dining room, shouting furiously, "Damn it! My grandfather's portrait is ruined too. Hughes says he heard ghostly whispers in the gallery last night. Someone is definitely behind this." Samuel set down his coffee cup, looking up at Matthew with calm eyes. "Perhaps we should consider what these portrait changes are trying to tell us, like the secrets we've deliberately forgotten." His words struck a nerve. Matthew's face turned ashen, and he glared fiercely at Samuel but had no retort. The atmosphere in the dining room grew heavier. Everyone knew the bizarre events surrounding the portraits had only just begun. In Samuel's study, the great-grandfather's diary detailing memory tailoring lay open on the desk. The yellowed pages contained his great-grandfather's scribbled yet forceful handwriting, explaining the principles and methods of this arcane art in plain terms. Samuel sat at the desk, reading while cross-referencing the leafy grass user manual sent by the society, deepening his understanding of this strange craft. Collective memory is not an ethereal thing, but the accumulation and anchoring of countless individual memories. Anchors can be objects, words, or paintings. The primary anchors of the Fawcett family are the gallery portraits. Gazed upon by generations, infused with emotion, they become vessels of memory, weaving the web of family history like threads. The great-grandfather's words were accessible yet profound. Samuel understood that memory tailoring did not truly cut memory, but rather destroyed memory anchors, leaving collective memories adrift until they gradually faded from people's minds. Like a woven net, remove the core threads, and the entire structure collapses. And the portraits were the core threads of the Fawcett family's memory web. At every family gathering, every new member's induction, someone would lead a visit to the gallery to pay respects to the ancestors and recount their deeds. Through countless gazes and stories, these portraits had absorbed the family's emotions and identity, becoming the most solid carriers of collective memory. Once these carriers were destroyed, the corresponding memories would wither like rootless plants. Samuel set down the diary and picked up the black clay jar of leafy grass sap. Removing the cork, a faint aroma like absinthe filled the air. He dipped his fingertip in the sap and sniffed gently. Exposed to air, it would lose its potency in less than 10 minutes, requiring quick action each time. Moreover, it caused no direct harm to humans, acting only on memory energy attached to physical objects, a fact that gave Samuel the courage to use it boldly within the manor. His gaze fell on a small mirror on the desk, reflecting his own face, refined, gentle, with the scholarly air of a man of letters. No one would associate this face with a memory-manipulating schemer. This was his greatest advantage. Matthew and the others saw him only as a harmless bookworm, never a serious rival, giving him ample time and space to execute his plan. To ensure the effectiveness of the memory alteration, Samuel had made meticulous preparations. He had studied the family tree, learning the deeds and relationships of every ancestor in detail. He had also collected the diaries and letters of family members, analyzing their emotional attitudes toward different ancestors. He discovered that the family's memories of Alfred and Isabella were already vague and tinged with negativity, making their memory anchors the easiest to destroy. For glorious ancestors like Matthew's grandfather, however, the anchors were extremely strong, requiring multiple applications of leafy grass sap to erase completely. In the days that followed, Samuel began implementing his second phase of the plan. Using his identity as a scholar, he frequented the family library, poring over materials about Matthew's grandfather. He deliberately mentioned to Matthew, "Cousin, I've been researching grandfather's deeds lately and noticed some unclear accounts during his time as privy councillor. Do you know anything about it?" Matthew's face stiffened instantly. "Accounts? What accounts? Grandfather's reputation is impeccable. Stop talking nonsense. Just a thought." Samuel smiled faintly, dropping the subject. But he knew his goal had been achieved. He had planted a seed of doubt in Matthew's mind. Once the memory anchor was destroyed, that doubt would take root, shaking Matthew's faith in his ancestors' glory. At the same time, Samuel intensified the haunting illusion. Using the cover of night, he created various eerie sounds in the gallery. He would pull the portrait frames with fine threads, making them appear to shake. He would sprinkle phosphorus powder in the corridors, creating faint green glows in the dark that servants mistook for will-o'-the-wisps. He continued using the whispering curse, making those who approached the gallery hear faint sighs. These simple tactics were highly effective. Panic spread throughout the manor, with many servants handing in their resignations. Matthew and the others were preoccupied with calming people and investigating the hauntings, leaving them no time to suspect Samuel. Seizing the opportunity, Samuel snuck into the gallery 3 more times to treat Matthew's grandfather's portrait. On the 7th morning, when Butler Hughes entered the gallery again, he let out a despairing scream. Matthew's grandfather's portrait had completely lost its facial features. The once grand official's robe was blurred beyond recognition, leaving only a shapeless dark mass. The nameplate below the frame had even lost its metallic luster, as if eroded by a century of time. When Matthew arrived at the gallery, he was on the verge of collapse. He threw himself at the portrait, scrubbing the canvas frantically, roaring, "Who did this? Who is destroying my ancestors?" Samuel stood at the back of the crowd, watching Matthew's outburst with no sympathy. He knew Matthew's grandfather's memory anchor had been completely destroyed. Now it was only a matter of time before the collective memory faded. Sure enough, that afternoon, Richard ran to Matthew, saying, "Cousin, I feel like we've forgotten something important about your grandfather. I remember he was a great man, but I can't recall what he actually did." Matthew froze. He felt the same way. He had once clearly remembered scenes of his grandfather attending royal banquets, receiving medals and honors, but now those memories were blurred, as if viewed through thick frosted glass. He tried to remember his grandfather's name, only to find it eluding him. "This is impossible," Matthew shouted. "How could we forget grandfather? He's the family's glory. But I really can't remember." Richard's face was pale. Emily says the same. She only remembers the portrait, not his deeds. Samuel stepped forward at the right moment, holding a family history book. "Perhaps we can find clues here. The family history should have detailed records." Everyone gathered around as Samuel opened the book to the chapter on Matthew's grandfather. To everyone's shock, those pages were blank. No words, no records, as if the glorious ancestor had never existed. "What's going on? Why is the family history blank?" Elena screamed. "I don't know." Samuel frowned, feigning deep thought. "Perhaps it's related to the portraits. When an ancestor's image is erased, written records about them are affected too. It might be some kind of mystical force." His words sparked another wave of panic. Matthew and the others were thrown into complete disarray, questioning their own memories and the family's history. Meanwhile, Samuel observed secretly, waiting for the perfect moment to strike. In the days that followed, more and more family members began experiencing memory loss. They forgot Alfred and Isabella, forgot Matthew's grandfather, and even started forgetting family traditions and rules. The atmosphere at the manor grew increasingly oppressive, with everyone living in fear and confusion. Seizing the opportunity, Samuel began cultivating an image of complete memory. At family gatherings, he would casually mention trivial family matters long forgotten by others, like the type of roses his great-grandmother loved, or his grandfather's youthful hobbies. These details surprised everyone, who exclaimed, "Samuel, how do you remember these things? We've all forgotten." "I enjoy studying the family's ancient books and diaries. I picked up these details from there," Samuel explained with a smile. "I think family history is important, so I've made a point of remembering it." His words earned him newfound respect. Amidst widespread memory chaos, Samuel's clear recollection and dedication to family history gradually won over the family elders. Several uncles who had initially supported Matthew began privately contacting Samuel, asking for his views on family affairs. Samuel knew his plan was halfway to success. All he needed now was the right moment to formally claim his inheritance, and that moment arrived soon. 2 weeks later, the family held an important meeting to discuss the inheritance. By this time, Matthew and Richard had lost public support due to the blurred ancestor memories. Their claims of unblemished reputation and noble bloodline rendered unprovable. The meeting began with Matthew attempting to assert his right. "I am the eldest grandson. Even if we can't remember grandfather's deeds, I should be the heir. But the will states the heir must gain the ancestors' approval." One uncle retorted, "Now we can't even remember who our ancestors were or what they did. How can we prove you have their approval?" "That's right," another elder echoed. "Samuel may be younger, but he remembers family history best. And his father, Mr. Edmund, was a man of integrity during his lifetime. Perhaps he is the most suitable heir." Matthew glared at Samuel, his eyes filled with anger and resentment. Samuel? He's not worthy. His grandmother had gypsy blood. Samuel finally spoke, his voice calm yet firm. Cousin, the rumors about my grandmother's ancestry are unsubstantiated. Moreover, the will emphasizes unblemished reputation, not pure blood. My father, Mr. Edmund, lived a life of integrity, never shaming the family. I myself have devoted myself to scholarship, bringing no dishonor to our name. In contrast, you and Cousin Richard, your direct ancestors, have been erased. We don't even know if they were truly of unblemished reputation. His words hit home, leaving Matthew and Richard tongue-tied. The meeting fell silent, with all eyes on Samuel. He knew he had won the argument. But just as the meeting was about to reach a decision, Butler Hughes burst in, holding a sealed letter. Gentlemen, this was found among the old patriarch's belongings. It says, to be opened in case of inheritance dispute. Everyone froze. Matthew rushed forward to snatch the letter. It's grandfather's letter. It must support me. He tore open the envelope, pulled out the paper, and read it hastily. But his face grew paler by the second, his hands trembling. Richard leaned over to look, also stunned. A flicker of unease crossed Samuel's mind. He had not expected the old patriarch to leave such a letter. He stepped forward, taking the paper from Matthew's hand and reading it carefully. The contents left everyone in shock. In the letter, the old patriarch admitted that Matthew's grandfather had indeed had questionable accounts. He had embezzled royal funds during his tenure as Privy Councillor, with the family covering up the scandal with money. Alfred's duel had not been an honorable affair, but a fight over a prostitute. Isabella's gambling debts had been repaid by her betrayal of the family's business secrets. The letter ended with these words, "The glory of the Fawcett family has never been built on false history. The true heir must have the courage to face the family's past and the ability to lead it into the future." A sense of clarity washed over Samuel. He finally understood. The old patriarch's will had not favored Matthew and the others, but had been a test for all descendants. And his memory tailoring, though unorthodox, had inadvertently uncovered the family's false history, aligning with the old patriarch's wishes. Now, what more do you have to say? Samuel looked at Matthew and Richard, his voice calm yet authoritative. Matthew and Richard stared blankly, unable to utter a word. The elders exchanged glances and finally nodded. Samuel, you're right. You have the courage to face the family's past and the ability to remember its history. From this day forth, you are the heir to the Fawcett family. Samuel nodded slightly, his heart filled with triumph. He had finally won the battle for inheritance. And the erased portraits would stand as a testament to his victory, forever reminding him that family history deserved truthful inheritance, not false concealment. After the announcement of his inheritance, Samuel did not show immediate elation. He maintained his gentle scholar's demeanor, going to the study each day to research the family's ancient books and property documents. This calmness reassured the remaining skeptical family members, who came to see Samuel as a steady and reliable leader. Yet Samuel knew his victory was fragile. Though Matthew and Richard had lost the inheritance, they still had many supporters within the family's businesses, especially in the London factories and Yorkshire estate, where many long-serving employees had grown up with them and remained loyal. Without completely dismantling their influence, future troubles were inevitable. Thus, Samuel launched his next plan, to destroy Matthew and Richard's prestige by exploiting human weaknesses. He knew fear and doubt were the most powerful weapons, and the haunting illusion he had created was the perfect tool. First, he targeted Hughes, Matthew's most trusted butler. As a long-serving servant, Hughes had been fiercely loyal to Matthew's father and had always seen Matthew as the rightful heir. Samuel knew that turning Hughes against Matthew would severely weaken Matthew's position within the manor. One night, Samuel snuck into the gallery again. this time without lethe grass sap, but carrying a small brass instrument, specially crafted by the society to mimic the sound of a woman's weeping. He hid the instrument in the gallery's air vent, then chanted the whispering curse, blending the sobs with faint whispers that drifted through the vents into the manor's corridors. Hughes happened to be patrolling the corridors that night. Hearing the eerie sounds, he rushed to inform Matthew. "Sir, it's Lady Isabella's crying. She's weeping in the gallery. It must be because you haven't paid proper respects to her. She's come to trouble you." Matthew, already frustrated by his lost inheritance, flew into a rage. "Nonsense! There are no such things as ghosts. If you spread rumors again, I'll throw you out of the manor." Hughes was stunned by the outburst, his eyes filled with disappointment and fear. He had served Matthew's father for years and had never been spoken to so harshly. Moreover, he firmly believed he had heard a ghost's cry. Matthew's reaction convinced him that the once young master had lost his sense of reverence and was no longer fit to lead the family. Samuel watched from the corridor corner, knowing the scales in Hugh's heart had begun to tip. Now he needed to add one final push. The next day, Samuel chanced upon Hughes in the study. He asked with feigned concern, "Hughes, I heard you were frightened last night. Are you unwell? If you need rest, please don't hesitate to tell me." Looking at Samuel's gentle face, Hughes felt a surge of warmth. After hesitating for a moment, he recounted the previous night's events. "Mr. Samuel, I truly heard crying and whispers, but Mr. Matthew not only refused to believe me, he shouted at me." "I believe you," Samuel interrupted, his tone serious. "The strange changes to the portraits cannot be a coincidence. Perhaps the ancestors are reminding us to face the family's past." Cousin Matthew's reaction was indeed overly hasty. "But he's upset. Please don't take it to heart." Samuel's understanding and trust deeply moved Hughes. He realized Samuel was the true leader who respected both the ancestors and the loyal old servants. From that day on, Hughes began actively reporting manor affairs to Samuel, gradually distancing himself from Matthew. With Hughes won over, Samuel turned his attention to Richard. Cowardly by nature, Richard was easily swayed by fear. Samuel decided to exploit this weakness to drive him completely out of family affairs. He learned that Richard had recently been courting an aristocratic young lady and often visited London theaters with her in the evenings. Thus, Samuel arranged an accident. One night after his date, Richard was traveling back to the manor alone in a carriage. As the carriage passed through a wooded area, it suddenly stopped. The coachman shouted in alarm, "Sir, there's a white figure ahead." Richard leaned out and saw a figure in a white dress standing in the woods, her face blurred. Exactly the outline from Aunt Isabella's portrait. Terrified out of his wits, he ordered the coachman to turn around and flee immediately. The white figure was a society member hired by Samuel. He had instructed her to wear a small amount of lethe grass sap, ensuring Richard's fear would further cloud his memories of Isabella, deepening his psychological trauma. After that incident, Richard became even more timid and cowardly. He no longer dared to go out at night or even approach the gallery. He took the initiative to inform the family that he wished to give up all his shares in the family businesses and retire to the countryside. Samuel tried his best to persuade him, but ultimately agreed reluctantly. With Richard out of the picture, only Matthew remained. Stubborn by nature, Matthew was not easily intimidated by fear, but he was extremely proud and cherished his reputation above all else. Samuel decided to target this vulnerability to destroy his prestige completely. He gathered evidence of Matthew's grandfather's embezzlement, account records and letters found among the old patriarch's belongings. Then he inadvertently leaked this evidence to a London newspaper. Soon, the headline, "Former Fawcett Privy Councillor Embezzled Public Funds," dominated the front pages. The news caused an uproar in London's upper class, severely damaging the Fawcett family's reputation. As the direct descendant of the disgraced councillor, Matthew became the target of public condemnation. Many aristocrats shunned him, and several business partners threatened to terminate their collaborations. Matthew collapsed completely. He knew his reputation was ruined, and he would never reclaim the inheritance. One night, he quietly left Fawcett Manor and was never heard from again. With his rivals eliminated, Samuel became the sole leader of the Fawcett family, controlling all its assets. Yet he was not content. He knew that for the family to thrive, the false memories of its past must be completely erased and a truthful legacy established. He ordered the family history to be rewritten, documenting all the buried scandals. Alfred's duel, Isabella's gambling debts, Matthew's grandfather's embezzlement. He also decided to have the erased ancestor portraits repainted, this time with true, unflinching faces, no longer idealized or falsified. When the new family history and portraits were completed, Samuel held a grand ceremony in the gallery, inviting all family members and business associates. Standing in the center of the gallery, he announced to the crowd, "The glory of the Fawcett family is not built on false history, but on truth and courage. Only by facing our past scandals and mistakes can we avoid repeating them and lead the family to greater prosperity." His words were met with thunderous applause. Everyone was impressed by his courage and foresight, believing that under Samuel's leadership, the Fawcett family would usher in a new era of glory. After the ceremony, Samuel remained alone in the gallery, gazing at the new portraits. The ancestors depicted, some with resolute faces, some with guilty expressions, some with confused eyes, all bore true, unadorned expressions, a far cry from the perfect yet false images of the past. Samuel felt a surge of emotion. He had not only won the inheritance but also secured the family's future. At that moment, his pocket vibrated gently. It was a message from the society's contact. "Congratulations on completing the ritual. The power of lethe grass has been exhausted. You may choose to leave the society or continue serving us." Samuel smiled as he read the message. He took out his phone and replied, "I choose to leave. The memories of the Fawcett family no longer need to be woven. They only need to be truthfully inherited." He deleted the message and put his phone away. Turning to leave the gallery, he stepped into a new, truthful future. London's late autumn had finally yielded to a clear afternoon. In the rose garden of Fawcett Manor, sunlight filtered through golden leaves, casting dappled shadows on the neatly trimmed lawn. Samuel sat on a bench in the center of the garden, holding a cup of black tea, watching servants busily prepare for the evening banquet. Tonight, he would formally entertain London's business tycoons and aristocratic politicians as the family's heir, announcing his control over the Fawcett legacy. Butler Hughes approached respectfully, handing him a list of banquet guests. "Mr. Samuel, invitations have been delivered to all guests. This is the list of confirmed attendees. Would you like to review it?" Samuel took the list and flipped through it casually. It included prominent London businessmen, government officials, and even representatives of the royal family. He nodded in satisfaction. "Excellent, Hughes. Tonight's banquet must be flawless." "Rest assured, sir." Hughes' tone was filled with deference. "I have arranged everything. There will be no mistakes." Samuel set down the list, his gaze falling on Hughes. He knew the old butler was now fully loyal to him. Once Matthew's most steadfast supporter, he had become Samuel's most capable assistant. This reinforced Samuel's belief that manipulating human hearts was far more powerful than arcane arts. "Hughes," Samuel suddenly asked, "do you remember the erased portraits?" Hughes' body tensed slightly, clearly recalling the bizarre scenes. But he quickly regained his composure. "Of course, sir. Those portraits were truly strange. But now it's all over. You've had new portraits painted, and we can finally face the family's history truthfully." Samuel smiled. "You're right. Facing history is the greatest respect we can pay to the family." He paused, then asked, "Have you ever wondered why those portraits faded so suddenly?" Hughes looked stunned, then shook his head. "I don't know, sir. Perhaps it was the ancestors' will, urging us to uncover the buried scandals." Samuel did not press further. He knew some truths were better left unspoken. Hughes only needed to see him as a leader guiding the family toward light, and that was enough. As evening fell, the banquet began. The manor's main hall was ablaze with lights, filled with guests. Dressed in a black tailcoat, Samuel stood at the entrance, warmly greeting each visitor. His elegant demeanor and polished conversation won the admiration of everyone present. "Mr. Samuel, congratulations on becoming the Fawcett heir." The gray-haired president of the London Chamber of Commerce shook Samuel's hand. "Your courage and foresight are truly admirable. The Fawcett family will undoubtedly flourish under your leadership." "Thank you for your kind words, Mr. President." Samuel replied with a smile. "I still have much to learn. I hope you will offer your guidance in the future." At that moment, a lady in an ornate gown approached. She was Eleanor, a prominent British philanthropist and Richard's distant relative. Looking at Samuel, she asked tentatively, "Mr. Samuel, I heard Mr. Richard suddenly moved to the countryside. I sent him an invitation to a charity banquet recently, but was told his address had changed. Is he well?" Samuel wore a perfectly concerned expression as he set down his champagne glass. "Mrs. Eleanor, there's no need to worry. Cousin Richard was quite shaken by something a while ago and hasn't been in the best spirits. He wanted a quiet place to recover. I've arranged for manor servants to check on him regularly and deliver supplies. He's doing well." "Shaken?" Mrs. Eleanor raised an eyebrow, her gaze drifting to the new portraits hanging in the banquet hall. Samuel had specifically commissioned these paintings, depicting Alfred with a hint of defiance and Isabella with an indelible weariness, starkly different from the flawless family portraits of the past. "Is it related to the strange happenings in the gallery?" London's social circles are abuzz with talk of Fawcett Manor's portraits fading on their own. Several nearby guests leaned in, clearly curious. Samuel did not evade the question. He gestured for a footman to refill Mrs. Eleanor's champagne, then spoke slowly. "The rumors are somewhat exaggerated, but unusual things did occur. However, it's all in the past now. We've rewritten the family history and painted new portraits. Look," he nodded toward the wall. "These portraits may not be perfect, but they are truthful. The Fawcett family should not hide from its past behind false glory." That was the old patriarch's teaching. His words were met with immediate approval. The old patriarch had been highly respected in London's business community. Invoking his teachings prompted many guests to nod in agreement. Mrs. Eleanor set aside her probing tone, raising her champagne glass. "Mr. Samuel, you are far more bold than I imagined. Richard is fortunate to have a cousin like you." Samuel smiled and clinked glasses with her, his gaze casually sweeping the banquet hall's corner. Standing there was a man in a dark coat, his collar turned up to hide most of his face. Samuel recognized him as the memory weaver's contact. Their eyes met briefly, and the man nodded before turning to leave. Halfway through the banquet, Butler Hughes quietly approached Samuel. "Sir, Matthew's former associates, the London factory manager and the Yorkshire estate steward, have arrived. They wish to pledge their loyalty to you. Have them wait for me in the study," Samuel instructed calmly. He knew these men had once been loyal to Matthew. With Matthew gone, they feared for their positions and were eager to defect. This was exactly what he wanted, not just to secure the heirship, but to fully control all family assets. At 11 o'clock that night, the banquet finally ended. After seeing off the last guests, Samuel rubbed his tired brows and headed to the study. Inside, two middle-aged men waited anxiously. They stood and bowed respectfully as Samuel entered. "Mr. Samuel, we were foolish to follow Matthew. Please be assured, we will serve you wholeheartedly from now on, with no second thoughts." The London factory manager spoke first, his tone ingratiating. "I've brought the factory's recent production reports for your review." Samuel did not take the reports. Instead, he sat behind the desk, his fingers tapping gently on the surface. "I understand you served Matthew for many years. Loyalty is commendable. But I want you to know, the Fawcett family needs people who can and will work, not parasites who only cling to others." His calm tone carried undeniable authority. The two men paled, quickly affirming their dedication. "We understand. We understand. We've already arranged production at the factory. Next month's output will increase by 10%. The Yorkshire Estates harvest is excellent this year. The wheat and wool will fetch a good price." Samuel finally took the reports, flipping through them casually. "Very well. Return to your posts and continue managing your affairs. I will send new assistants to help you. Report any issues directly to me." "Yes, yes. Thank you, Mr. Samuel." The two men breathed a sigh of relief and bowed deeply before departing. Alone in the study, Samuel leaned back in his chair and closed his eyes. His mind replayed the events of recent months. The blurred portraits in the gallery, Richard's terrified face, Matthew's departure, and the old patriarch's letter. He knew he had rewritten the family's memory with memory tailoring and cleared his path by exploiting human weaknesses. But this was not the end, but a new beginning. He rose and walked to the bookshelf, pushing aside the heavy Latin tomes once more to reveal the hidden niche. Inside, the black clay jar of lethe grass sap was empty, leaving only the Silver Society badge. Samuel picked up the badge, his fingertips tracing the vine and pen pattern, his eyes reflecting complex emotions. Over 5 years in the society, he had obtained lethe grass and mastered memory tailoring with their help, ultimately winning the inheritance. But he knew the society never did anything without expecting something in return. They had aided him likely to gain influence over the Fawcett family, hoping to make him their pawn in London's upper class. "Memory weavers," Samuel whispered, placing the badge back in the niche. "I will not be anyone's pawn." He closed the niche and turned to the window. Moonlight spilled over the manor lawn, and the distant gallery loomed like a silent giant in the night. Samuel knew the erased portraits and rewritten memories were the foundation of his throne. But unlike Matthew and the others, he would not hide behind false glory. He would lead the Fawcett family to build a new legacy on the truth of their history. At that moment, there was a soft knock at the study door, and Hugh's voice came through. "Sir, your supper is ready." Also, the society's representative left a letter on the tray outside. Samuel opened the door to find a bowl of warm soup and a sealed letter on the tray. He picked up the letter. The vine and pen wax seal was prominent. Breaking it open, he found a single line. "The society will hold a ritual on the next full moon. We expect you to attend. You owe us." Samuel's gaze darkened. He knew the society would not let him go easily. But he was no longer the Cambridge student who needed their support. He was now the heir to the Fawcett family, with control over vast wealth and connections. He held the letter over a candle, watching it burn to ashes before picking up the bowl of soup. The warm liquid slid down his throat, chasing away the night's chill. A faint smile tugged at Samuel's lips. He owed the society a debt, and he would repay it. But not in the way they expected, but in his own. The moonlight outside grew brighter, illuminating every corner of the manor. Samuel knew a new confrontation was imminent. But this time, he was no longer the hidden memory tailor, but a leader standing in the sunlight. With his wisdom and courage, he would protect everything the Fawcett family held dear, and safeguard the truthful memories he had reawakened. In the gallery, the newly painted portraits stood silently in the moonlight. Alfred, Isabella, Matthew's grandfather, and Samuel's father Edmund, their faces clear and true, as if silently recounting the family's past. Samuel's figure, silhouetted against the moonlight, stood tall and resolute. He was the new master of Fawcett Manor, the rewriter of memories, and the forger of the future. Night deepened, and the manor fell silent, broken only by the distant toll of a church bell. Samuel knew his era had only just begun.